Okay, welcome to episode 13 of Diary of a Private Investigator. My name is Nathan. I am the owner and lead investigator of Dolos Investigations based in Sheffield and Doncaster in the UK. Welcome to Unlucky for Some, episode 13. Ooh, not unlucky for me though, because I've got a special guest on today's show. Exciting times. But before we introduce the special guest, I'm going to keep her hanging for a little bit. I'm going to mention the buymeacoffee.com/DOAPI, Diary of Our Private Investigator. Special mention to Simon Frost. Simon donated $50. Thank you very much, Simon. That was very, very generous of you. As I mentioned in the past, all donations will go to the production of the show. I am a sole trader. I'm not a limited company. So when I do these shows, I do it because I enjoy talking, and I do lose work by coming on to do these shows. So therefore, the money helps pay for the show. So if you do want to do a donation to Buy Me a Coffee, or you actually become a member of buymeacoffee.com, DOAPI, then please do so. Also, a quick mention that I have an email address. If you do want to email in any questions or any stories, it is diaryofaprivateinvestigator@gmail.com. They're the introductions. Quickly, got two sponsors for today's show. The first one is Blue Husky, BLUHUSKI, Blue Husky, which I'll talk about in the middle of the show, and the Covert Group. Both are to do with the industry, so I haven't sold my soul to the devil. Like I said, I wouldn't. I'm keeping it on topic. So more about those in the middle of the show. Now, today we have a special guest. We have a, dare I say this without sounding misogynistic, a female private investigator. I hesitate when I say that because we should never label anybody, but you are, well, I believe you. I believe you're a woman.
I am.
Fantastic. Phew. Thank God for that. So today we have Charlotte Tollan, who is the co-director of Ceres Mesotron Limited.
Mesotron.
That's easy for you to say. Mesotron Limited. So I'm just going to read something out because I thought it was brilliant. So Charlotte contacted me because she'd seen the viral TikTok that I did, which is now over 242,000 views, which is great for my vanity scale. I'm famous in my own little mind. And she wrote to me on LinkedIn. So I'm just going to very quickly read it out and just make a blush into the same colour of the dress that she's wearing today, because I think it's brilliant. Hi, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to reach out to say that I've been catching up with all your podcasts from the start since I came across the viral TikTok. Now, this is the interesting bit, because it says on episode 6, where you mentioned you used to work in high-risk domestic violence unit and wanted to express how well you discussed this. Flattery will get you everywhere, as we see. And you were actually in a seriously and coercive controlling relationship, which we're going to talk about. And it goes on to sort of say that you were stalked by your partner at the time, and that it was from that you got into the anti-surveillance, and that's what got you into this world of private investigation. But then it also went on to say that you were in television, media, stage, and things like that. And I was like, well, if that's an interesting person, then I need to interview you. So that's why I've invited you onto the show.
Thank you.
So the first question that I've got for you is, can you get me onto the Traitors?
I have no links to the traitors.
Okay, second question is can I be a hunter on the hunted?
Again, I have no links to them, but I'm sure you could.
Okay, and that, ladies and gentlemen, was Charlotte Tollan. Thank you very much. It was great to meet you. Okay, so Charlotte, you are the co-director of Ceres Mesotron Limited.
I am recently appointed co-director, yes.
So first question is where does that name come from?
It's an anagram. John, who is the other co-director who set up the company, is an absolute brain box. And there's a really long, complicated story about how it's an anagram. I could find it if you wanted me to. It's on my phone. But it, in a roundabout way, means no more secrets.
Ah.
Sneaky double meaning.
No more secrets, right? Okay, I was going down the Latin front or something like that, but okay, that's good. So, where shall we start? So tell me about the company. Let's start with the company.
So the company was set up by John in 2022, and I worked with him pretty much from the beginning. We met on a surveillance course it was a totally new thing to me, whereas for him it was a refresher. He's been in the industry in various ways for so many years. And I've worked really close with him. And then recently he sort of said, I really want to push this. And me being me, super keen, as you realised earlier, was like, I'll help you. We'll do everything we can. And then he had a meeting with the boss, his wife, the co-director, and said, I'd like to bring Charlotte on as a director. And I think they both agreed. And I had a phone call from him saying, would you be interested? And I bit his fingers off. Not literally. He's still got all his fingers.
Okay. So going back to, so obviously that's where you are now. This is where you currently are with your business. But obviously we touched upon your past. Mm-hmm. So let's go right to the beginning, to how you started off in all this. And you mentioned that sort of from school that you went into sort of show business and doing theatre and acting and stuff like that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was always very theatrical, not very focused at all in school, was not interested in learning anything, which is totally different to me now. I just want to learn everything I possibly can. I trained professionally in classical ballet, which is about as close to military training as you can possibly get, just in a very different uniform. I then worked in show business for almost 10 years. And in the last few years of that, I ended up in a really abusive relationship with someone who I was working with, which is why it was so difficult to get out of. And we were talking about this earlier, that in your last, episode 6, was it?
Yeah.
You had a really good understanding of why people can't just leave.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to do so. And at the end of that relationship, COVID hit. So it was my perfect time to get out. It was an absolute godsend to me. The industry came to a stop. So there was no more blackmail of, we've got a show tomorrow night. It didn't matter. Yeah. And a friend of mine who is also in show business, she's a huge advocate for women's aid. She helped me out. I ended up with 3 police cases. I left him with pretty much nothing, moved back home to my parents' house and started from scratch.
Right.
So that's the sort of abuse part. And then during COVID, I was being stalked by him online. And my fear was also that it was going to be in person. I had no proof of this, but you just never know.
Yeah.
Someone contacted me and said, did I want a little job working on a COVID testing site? And like I said, I left with nothing. So I said, yeah, I'll do that happily. It was run by the Gurkhas. And then it was soon taken over by a military-run company where the men were predominantly close protection backgrounds. And I made quite good friends with them, was talking to them about everything I was going through with the police, the 3 cases that I had going on, and I was kind of left to piece my own cases together. And I didn't realise I was doing open source. I didn't know that that was a thing. I didn't know what anti-surveillance was. And with discussions with them, we realised that that's exactly what I was doing. And one of them said, well, have you heard about surveillance? And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. Looked it up. It really interested me. And a few of them suggested various course providers. I chose one, went on the course thinking that could be a cool side hustle, because in my head, I was still going to go back into show business full time. And now it's totally flipped. And I'm in surveillance and private investigations full time, and show business is my side hustle.
Right.
And I loved the course. When I went, I was you've met me, I'm quite extravagant. And I had some very funky hair at the time because COVID. I think I did what every female did and ended up with some crazy hair colours. Right. Which the course provider was a little bit shocked at when I turned up with my giant suitcase of all my disguises, because that's what I thought it was. Yeah. But yeah, I soon took to it like a duck to water, and that's where I met John.
Right.
So here we are.
And here we are now. So going back to, obviously we've spoke before recording about your abusive relationship, and you said that you are comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
In brief, and what we chatted about before we sort of turned on the recording equipment was, I think the key point is what you sort of made is that what struck home when you listened to me is people just turn around and sort of say, why don't you just leave him?
Yeah.
And it's not like that at all. It's a wearing down process over weeks and months. But you said for you it's different because you actually worked with the guy, and then you got the added pressure then of going to work. How was that for you?
Really difficult. Our entire lives were intertwined. So not only did I live with him, my whole working life was also with him. So there was always that fear of, if I left, he used to threaten me and would say things like, you won't have a career without me. I'll end your career. I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done. I'd done nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing at all. Was totally innocent into it. And I left him around 6 years ago, I think it was. And it's interesting because to this day, people are still coming to me saying, I've seen what you were talking about. You're absolutely right. People that I was linked with in the past are now getting in touch with me and saying, I see those behaviours and I'm really sorry you went through what you did. But it took a while for people to kind of realise that I wasn't the bad guy. Yeah. He was the bad guy. He played the victim.
They are master manipulators.
Massively.
And he was also your boss as well.
He was.
So that makes it even more difficult as well, then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really?
And he had all my money in the business account. So I literally had nothing. It was, my entire life was intertwined with him. My whole identity really was tied to an identity that we'd created. So I impersonated Marilyn Monroe. I still do. And all of my work was in his show, on his website. We'd created a stage name for me. So it's like I had a whole persona and life that was entirely tied to him.
That's big, that, isn't it? Because it's, I mean, sort of the cases that I dealt with, it's sort of, I say just a relationship. A relationship can be all-encompassing and all-powerful and your identity. But for you as well, it's your work as well as your relationship, and you can't escape it 24/7. So you said that it was around the time of COVID that you left.
Yeah.
Do you think you'd have still been there now if it hadn't been for COVID?
I think people say, I think it's an average of 7 attempts to leave, that it takes someone to leave an abusive relationship. I had definitely reached that 7th time, probably more. I'd attempted to get out countless times and always ended up back there really unhappily. I really didn't want to be there. I even, and this is awful, and if they're listening to this, they're probably going to hate me, but I don't mind. I lied to my friends for the last year of that, and I told them that I'd left, and I couldn't bear to tell them that I'd gone back. So I pretended that I was living at home, and I wasn't, because I just couldn't tell them. I said, I'm working with him, and I think he thinks there's a chance, but I'm, that's all it is. We're just working together.
It's weird, isn't it? Because there's clearly a part of your brain that knows what your friends and family are thinking, and therefore you actually consciously lie, even though you're still in a relationship, and that's almost more dangerous than being all the way down, sort of thinking I can't leave, and losing everybody. It's in some respects it's more dangerous because you're protecting him, and you know you're in an abusive relationship, but then still can't leave as well.
Yeah.
And I think in some respects as well, obviously the case that I talked about back in episode 6 that I dealt with is that that person lost all their friends and family and had nobody, whereas you still had friends. So how was it for them when you were going through it? What was the advice or the input that you got from your friends?
They were brilliant. The friends that I was still in touch with, because he had kind of, whether intentionally or not, pulled me away from a lot of friends that I did have that I'm now back in touch with, and very, very much so. They're my absolute best friends now. But the ones that I kind of lied to about it all, they were really understanding, obviously, when I left.
Yeah.
I had left and then went back. They were really understanding. I never actually told them that I'd been with him for the entire year following that before it all kicked off with the police. So yeah, it was really, really tough.
It's difficult, isn't it? But I think adversity, that's when you find out who your true friends are, as people are, and people who are true friends will stick by you no matter what happens in your life and what mistakes you make. And I'm not saying it's a mistake being in that relationship. You're in that relationship, and obviously, like I say, over time things change. So you left. Is that person still in that job to this day?
Very much so.
Right, okay. And has that person got a new relationship? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I've heard stories. He was 19 years older than me. And I did hear a story that he made a move on another very young female who refused him. And I'm not entirely sure of how that ended up, but
Right.
he's very much still working. I believe he has had some karma recently, which I'll tell you about off mic.
we might have to do a Patreon episode where you tell me on tell me on Patreon episode, and we'll get some money out of it.
Yeah, I'm going for that. Yeah, he's had a little bit of karma. I think, like I said, his true colours are very much coming through, and there are a lot of people that are now approaching me saying, we're very aware of exactly what you went through. But the thing is, had I have known about a thing called Clare's Law, I would have done a Clare's Law, and he did have a history.
Right.
His ex-partner had also pre-warned me of his behaviour, but she was the bad guy, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Just for the people who are listening who don't know about Clare's Law, just briefly explain Clare's Law.
So I think in another one of your episodes you mentioned the Freedom of Information Act. So under that, you can write to the police under Clare's Law and request information about your own partner or someone else that you're concerned about. So, for example, if my best friend was involved with someone and I was concerned, I could write to Clare's Law on her behalf. If the police have any information to disclose on that person that is relevant in terms of a domestic abusive relationship, they can disclose that to you. If I was to write on behalf of a best friend, they could disclose that information to her, not to me. Yeah. And it's fully confidential. So, yeah, it will only be... So it doesn't matter whether they've got a criminal record. The information they'll disclose is purely if you are of risk of anything domestic related. Yeah.
So, yeah, loads of key points there. It's got to be relevant. So it won't just be a case of, he's got an offence of robbery 10 years ago, because that's not relevant to the relationship. Exactly. So it's to do with domestic violence. And part of what I was involved in, you'll get a sergeant, so it was back in my day, who will sit down and go through it, and then they decide what they disclose, and obviously risk. It's a brilliant law.
It is brilliant. It's
really
very insightful. Yeah,
it opens your eyes. Unfortunately, sometimes by the time people become aware of the law and apply, they're already in too deep and can't get out. So it's something that you have to. It's like, when is the right time? I mean, you could get to a point now that when you get a new partner, do you apply for it? It's almost like a vetting process.
I honestly think you should, but I think people also have to be aware there will only be information if it's been reported. So even if it's been NFA'd, or even if it's been a report that the person then hasn't decided to pursue with for whatever reason, they've just handed it to police as information and said, I don't want to pursue this as a case, the police still have to disclose it under Clare's Law. However, that person could have a history. But if someone hasn't disclosed that to the police, obviously they don't know, and they'll come back saying there's nothing to declare to you. That doesn't mean that person doesn't have a history or isn't capable of abusing you. It just means the police have no record of that. Yeah.
NFA'd, no further action.
Yeah.
So that's to do, so there's a difference, isn't there? So there's like the intelligence picture. So basically the police have different systems. One is an intelligence system where it's literally that. It's information about it. It doesn't go through a prosecution or CPS, or it doesn't even have to get a statement from the victim. It's just recorded as intelligence. So what you're saying there is it's really important that if you are suffering from domestic abuse on any kind of scale, that you report it to the police, and you can say at that time, however, I don't support a prosecution.
Yes.
So it's worth doing that. So it's recorded.
Totally.
For
I
the
think
safety of everybody, really.
it's also worth noting if a case is NFA'd, that can either be by the police or through CPS. So my case went to CPS, and despite huge amounts of evidence, it was NFA'd. And my ex-perpetrator spent ages boasting on social media that I was wrong because the case was NFA'd. NFA'd doesn't necessarily mean that person is innocent, as you know. It simply means there isn't enough evidence. So if someone gets a Clare's Law declaration and they think, well, they were NFA'd, they must be innocent, that's not necessarily true. Someone obviously had a reason to report that, and that should be taken seriously enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you escaped that relationship, and you mentioned about anti-surveillance, which is part of the reason, because obviously that's an important part. The other part is you got into anti-surveillance. What sort of techniques, or what did you discover? How was that journey?
I noticed that I was becoming really astute to who was following me, who was around me. I was really paying attention, considering I'd had no surveillance training, really paying attention to little things like what shoes they're wearing, tattoos, distinguishing features. Without any training in that, that's just, I think, pure fear and knowing that there could be someone following me, or he could have asked someone to follow me, aka hired a private investigator. Not that that particularly crossed my mind. I was also very aware of cars following me, shapes of headlights. I knew which vehicles he had and which vehicles his friends had, and I was very alert to if a vehicle of a similar shape was behind me. I would go round a roundabout twice, or take a turn, or 3 sides of a square, all these things that we do when you do your anti-surveillance out of an area.
Yeah.
I was doing that to get to and from work and to get home. I wouldn't park my car in front of my house. I'd park around the corner and walk. So if he drove round, it didn't look like I was there.
Yeah.
All these silly things. Same when I was walking. I'd stop, look back, use reflections, narrow tunnels. And I had no training in that. It was just pure instinct and fear for years.
I kind of hesitate because I was going to say that's great, but then the context of what we're talking about is just not great. But all everything that you've described there it's all sort of textbook. And what I do say in the past is that one of my stock phrases that I've got is that you can't teach common sense.
Yeah.
And everything that you've just described there, you can read in books and read online and talk to people and stuff like that. But you have to understand it, and it has to be intrinsic in your nature and what you're doing. You've obviously developed that skill because you have to.
Yeah.
And then it's ported into the job that you do today.
Yeah.
Do you still do that today?
Very much so. Yeah, I'm really aware of everything. I've always been quite good at remembering small details. I am on the autistic spectrum, so I tend to remember number plates and makes and models of cars to an extreme degree. But I certainly became more aware of that skill when I had to call upon those skills. And now I'm very aware I'm doing it, and I'm trained to do it. So it's part of my life. Yeah. My ex-partner, not the abusive one, I should add, we were out day drinking, having a good time, and he noticed what I was doing. We were on the underground, and I'd get off a carriage and walk around to the next one, and he'd go, "You need to switch off."
Yeah.
And I'm just like, no, I'm not going to, because I think it's so important for people to have an awareness around them. And I think that's one thing, not only being in an abusive relationship has learned, but I think as a female or even a male operative, I think we've got such a good awareness of our surroundings. I think more people need to have that. Nowadays, everyone's head down in phones, and they've got no awareness of who's around them ever. Yeah. And, they don't have to be being stalked. They could be being watched for another reason. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, massive. That's a massive point. Massive point. I mean, I've got a daughter, and the amount of lectures that she's had about being aware of your surroundings, being aware of people. And to be fair, my son's had the same lecture when he reached an age where he was catching the bus and going to the local the local mall, Meadow Hall shopping centre, where the train stops. It's not the best of areas, and I say to him, don't actually be on your phone, because you get off, you're on your phone. There were people there, and obviously it doesn't help because I was in the cops, so I'd be like always telling them the stories of like, watch out, because I knew that the robbers would be waiting at the train stop for the people getting off on the phone, and they'd be snatching the phone and robbing them. So I was like, Almost so, and I always used to say to him, don't have all your money in your wallet. Take the money out and have it in your what I call a Johnny pocket. Showing my age there, but that the little pocket in your jeans, which you may or may not have had a Johnny in. Put Adam.
I just clicked what one of them is. I was like, Johnny pocket. Oh,
you know what I mean? That's what it's, I'm sure that's what Mr. Levi designed it for back in 1800 and whatever. Stick your tortoise shell in your little Johnny pocket. There you go, a bit of history for you. And I used to say, and I almost like put like a $5 down your sock, and because at least then if you get robbed, you haven't lost all your money, and you've got money to get home with, or ring the police. That's 10 pence, isn't it? If they still have phone boxes these days. So yeah, you got to be aware of your surroundings. And you're absolutely 100% right that today's youths walk around. I mean, even the older guys that walk around. I mean, somebody nearly walked into me the other day, and I was actually just stood still.
Yeah.
I was walking the dog, so I stopped for the dog, and he almost nearly walked into me because he's just reading the phone.
On the flip side, though, as an investigator, it's great when someone doesn't have any awareness, because you can follow them for days.
Yeah.
In the same outfit, and they have no idea. Can be good.
Yeah. Well, I've done surveillance on something like that, but it's good to be aware of your surroundings. And I think once it's ingrained in you, those techniques that you've talked about. I mean, I've sort of said on this show that I still do it to this day.
Yeah.
You just do it because it's just what you do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Today's show is sponsored by the Covert Group, covert in nature, transparent in business. They are UK surveillance operatives turned manufacturer, making kit exclusively for the investigations trade. Their Observer range allows the public to buy their own investigator-approved spy cameras, audio bugs, and portable power, helping you with everything from theft to cheating partners without the associated costs. Members of the trade or public, check out their website and send them an email using promo code $10 and get 10% off all orders. This show is also sponsored by Blue Husky. Blue Husky is spelt BLUHUSKI, Blue Husky. Blue Husky are a family business over 10 years old. They specialise in covert tech and trackers. This is where I get my trackers from, so I can say firsthand that they are a good company and they do quality products. They have free postage on orders over £250, and they are resellers of Stealthtronic, Lawmate and GoTech 7, which for people in the industry should all be familiar with the names I've just mentioned. They pride themselves in the bespoke-built Blue 2600 small tracker and their beast, the Blue 20,000, which I've got, which I like because you can charge it and it's completely sealed, so you're not going to get water damage on their trackers. So please do check out the Blue Husky website for all your covert needs. The OSINT work is a phrase that we use, open source intelligence, OSINT, OSINT. You mentioned that you were doing that on your own.
Yeah.
What techniques did you discover?
Without giving too much away. So I blocked him on all the social media platforms, but because his profiles were open, there are sites that you can use to still view people's profiles and stories and things like that. Obviously, using a VPN and creating different accounts, viewing profiles, things like that. I was also getting strange phone calls and emails and all sorts of things, and there's obviously ways of linking them to IP addresses. But I was kind of using it as a way of monitoring his behaviour. Over the years of knowing him, I knew how he worked and the cycle of abuse. So you obviously have your idealization stage, and then your tension building, and then there's the eruption of negative behaviour, whatever that is, and then the repair afterwards. And that was kind of his behavioural pattern in life. So I would monitor that online through his posts, and you could tell he'd have moments of what seemed like clarity and gratefulness and niceness online, and then there'd be the tension building, and that's when the posts would build up. And then I'd know that after that would be an attack of some description towards me, and it was only a matter of time before that happened in person. So I was constantly monitoring, screenshotting everything, sending everything through to the police and saying, this is what's happening. This is his pattern of behaviour. This is telling, and you need to take this seriously.
Yeah.
And I was monitoring that for years and years.
It's a full-time job, isn't it?
It was a full-time job. And that's where, again, we were in COVID, obviously, so I didn't have much to do. When I handed my huge file to the police, because it took a long time for them to take me seriously too, they took all the details down, they took statements, they did all the things. And then I was sort of saying to them afterwards, look, there's also this and this and this and this and this. And I had to force them to take my phone to take a download from it, because I said, there's recordings on there, there's screenshots, all the messages. So it was Essex police who were dealing with the case at the time. And I drove there and I handed them a huge file and my phone. And I said, I'm not leaving until you take this. The evidence is here. Please look at it. And eventually an officer came out and had a look and she said, you've saved us 6 months' work here. This is huge. Thank you. And within that, I had all the screenshots of everything I'd found online. Yeah. Everything, all the pattern of behaviour, everything was in there. I'd analysed everything. And I'd said, look, he's written this because this gets to me in this way. He's written this because he knows this means something to me. This is a subliminal message he's trying to send to me that no one else is going to understand. And I'm telling you, this is what it means.
I think... when you're talking, my head's pinging off like question. I think as I mentioned, after this show, I'm going to go and see somebody who's contacted me because they're suffering coercive and controlling behaviour, an abusive relationship. I'm going to see the parents because the parents have identified a change in their daughter's behaviour. Really good. So I'll be doing that. But part of what I say, and I think part of the message that you've put across is that if you're in the position to take responsibility for your own investigation and your own evidence gathering, I think that's absolutely massive, because that's what I say to people. Because as an investigator, we obviously charge an hourly rate or a day rate or whatever. We will do what we can for you to help you, but also I give, and I'm sure you do as well, give the advice of, this is what you need to look out for. This is what you need to do. So doing what you did, like I said, and I know how understaffed and overworked the police are. So in order to try and get a successful prosecution, you've got to do everything that you can, and it includes diarising everything, and like you say, screenshotting everything. And I mean, that's part of what the cops do, is that they will have a file on somebody with all the evidence, and you've obviously arrived and sort of said, here's whatever. Mm-hmm. A load of work.
And you're going to look at it. Yeah.
Second question I was thinking is how long was it until you got your phone back?
A long time. And I had to fight to get it back as well. I'd bought a new phone in the interim, but I wanted it kind of also for my records, because although I had the screenshots and I'd printed everything out to hand to them, I still wanted that evidence. And I kept hold of that until about last year. Yeah. Only last year did I finally go, okay, we can close that chapter now and I can get rid of that phone. But it took a long time for me to kind of want to let go of that. I guess in my eyes, it's a case of, I know the police have still got a copy. So if anything ever comes up, they have got it. I don't need to keep it anymore. I can let go.
Yeah. Because again, I know the backlog with the police when they seize things, it takes an inordinate amount of time to download it and to store it all. Did they give you a reason as to why no further action was taken?
So the 3 cases that I had, and again, I'm quite happy to be open about it, was coercive controlling behaviour. And that was the initial one that I reported. And then that kind of grew into stalking and harassment. So coercive controlling behaviour, it came back as lack of evidence. Despite that huge file, it did go to CPS and I appealed it. So that was NFA'd because of lack of evidence, which really, really confused me. The second case was obviously the stalking and harassment, having left the relationship. And I was told right at the beginning, even when I was handing them the initial files, that if I had 7 pieces of strong evidence, it's enough for a conviction. So the OIC, officer in charge at the time, looked at the case and said, you've got more than 7 pieces of strong evidence here. This should be enough to charge him. This is good. Nothing happened. Just clicked away in the background, and eventually that was NFA'd too.
How long did it take them to make that decision?
So the stalking and harassment, I kept having to report. So I think after a certain amount of months, it drops off the radar. So I kept having to report things, and it kept obviously pushing it back up as, okay, well, this is still ongoing. I can't remember exactly how many months it is. It's been a little while. So yeah, that went on for about 2 years before it was eventually NFA'd. And then the other case that I had was for rape within the relationship, which obviously there was lack of evidence of. And I went through a whole awful process, sitting there in a room, being interviewed, camera, lady behind a wall, this whole thing. It was absolutely traumatizing having to sit there and talk about that. But again, NFA'd straight away, because how can you prove that within a relationship? It's my word against his.
It's not great, is it? It's not a great advert for reporting things to the police. What you're talking about, and I don't think there isn't a way of shying away from it. Having been on the side of the police and being an investigating officer and everything that you've just described, I think as a lay person listening to it, I would feel outraged, thinking that you've provided all the evidence, you've got all the evidence, you've basically spoon-fed the police saying this is the evidence, this is what he's doing, this is why he's doing it.
Yeah.
Then to go to the stalking, these are the parts of stalking that he's got, and then you got the rape as well, and then all three, no further action. How do you pick yourself up from that?
I think there had been quite a period of time. It had been really traumatic for a long time, and the ongoing stress of it all was damaging my new relationship at the time. So I think I knew I needed to let that go, and I knew that karma would come. So yeah, I just knew that eventually he would get some form of karma. The thing with the coercive controlling relationship that I was told over and over and over is that it's a new law and it's very hard to prove. My argument every single time was, it's been a law for 5 years and it's a law for a reason. So to be able to say it's a new law, it's hard to prove, that for me isn't good enough.
No.
It's still a law, and I'm proving it to you. Yeah. So here's your evidence. There's your law. He's in breach of that.
I think the correct answer is it's a new law and we haven't been trained in it and we don't really know what we're doing. I think that's what they're saying, because that's generally what happens is that new law comes out and then about 6-12 months later the cops get the training on it and find out what it is and have to, horrible terminology, but hit the ground running with it. And that, like you say, that's no excuse. It's already gone through all the tests and Parliament and everything like that. It's all been ratified, and it's a law straight away. Just because the cops have got a lack of understanding of what the Harassment Act is or what coercive and controlling behaviour is, that's not your fault. It's there. It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing listening to a victim like yourself. Like I say, on the other side of the fence, I was involved in it, so you kind of understand the police's point of view and the CPS point of view and the difficulty in proving it. It's just quite harrowing, isn't it?
Yeah. I think one of the strangest comments that was made to me was with all the online stalking, obviously I was going on, I was constantly monitoring, and I did that to protect myself. And I was handing that evidence over constantly, and the OIC turned around to me and said, you need to stop looking. You need to stop looking because clearly this is getting to you. And I said, hold on a minute. I'm in a way being stalked. And he was using things that I was putting very little online, but the small things that he was using. And I said, so he's clearly watching me. This is stalking.
Yeah.
I know I was watching him, but it's to monitor a pattern of behaviour. It's self-protection. But he turned around to me and said, you need to stop looking. And I said, well, if I'm walking down the street and someone's following me and I don't look, it doesn't stop them following me. I'm still being stalked.
Yeah.
That was a totally moot point in my eyes.
I agree. I don't know. I'm just thinking of the OIC. They probably just thought, for flipping X's sake, stop giving us so much work. Because every time you give them work, they then have to act upon it and do it. And I can imagine that, again, this is just life and society, but they've probably got X amount of cases, 10, 15, 20 cases, and you keep coming and saying, this is the evidence, this is the evidence.
Yeah.
So for your own self-preservation, you have to, and this is how my brain works, is, so please tell me if it's different to how your brain works, is, but with the trauma that I've gone through in my career and life, I put it in a box, and the box sits at the back of my head, and then I carry on. And I talked about this in a previous episode, that when the lid starts to rattle and you think it's going to jump out, I sit on the box and it doesn't come out. Is that how you've dealt with it, or do you talk about it or revisit it in any way?
I talk about it now, but more in a comical sense. It's like although it was very traumatic, and I look back at that time as though I had a black cloud over me, I think now I can kind of have a laugh and a joke about it. So much so that me and John were talking the other day about things for the business, and I was saying I learned a lot from him about how I wouldn't run a business. He sort of said, "Oh yeah, what happened there?" So I explained to John some of the ins and outs of what had happened, and he said, "It's really good to hear you laughing about it, because that just shows to me that you've got a good mindset about it, despite everything that happened." And I just said, "Yeah, I actually find it quite comical." And every now and then I have a flashback, and it's like I catch that micro expression of disgust, that we all learn to read and monitor. I catch myself doing that. It's like a micro expression of me going, "Oh, disgusting." And then it's like, actually, I can laugh about it now. I've learned a lot. I know what I won't put up with again going forward. Yeah.
You've got to learn and develop, haven't you? If you don't, I mean, there are people that fall out of one abusive relationship and then just seem to fall into the next abusive relationship and into the next abusive relationship, and it's almost like what they're attracted to or what they find attractive. And you talk to victims, and that they'll go out with somebody that treats them right and treats them nice and pays them compliments, and it's almost like part of the nature kind of rejects it and thinks, this is weird. I'm not used to people treating me nice. And then they find the bad I won't say the bad boy, because there's women who abuse men in relationships as well, which is another important message. It's not just women victims, but they seem to just go down that road. So it has to be I don't know what the answer is or the question, but there has to be some sort of break that breaks the cycle, that makes you move forward and find out that there are loving people out there who there is a way to treat somebody with mutual respect.
Yeah, I've definitely had close calls again since, and I've been in situations that have been manipulative and in a way abusive following that. But I think it's because there's different forms of abuse, and this is something I've come to learn, because that for me was very overt, very noticeable. He was very narcissistic. And then following that, not everyone is necessarily narcissistic. So I trained myself to recognise all the signs of what happened there, the love bombing and the pure narcissistic attacks, to someone else who's maybe a little bit more clever and a little bit more manipulative and more covert and more subtle about it. There's so many different forms of it that you can train yourself to recognise one, but then be trapped in another because of that. I think you've got to recognise all the signs and not just look at something, again, that I've learned I think is important, is you look at them and you look at their behaviours and you look at red flags and you look at things that they're doing, but there's a reason why you're putting up with that. What is there in you? Is it people-pleasing tendencies? Is it that you don't want to upset someone? Why is it that you are attracting that person? I think you've got to do that inner work too, which I'm still doing.
Did he ever do any of the types of abuse in front of other people, or was it always just you two in the room?
He did do it in front of other people, but it was often at work, and it was a case of, well, I'm the boss. And he would do it to other people too, but it was, I'm in boss mode. So he kind of got away with that, because in show business, that's quite normal to have someone shout at you, to have someone, kind of, it can be quite nasty at times. So that was brushed off as normal.
And he's still working in the show business. So with all the media attention to what's currently going off all the time, certainly like with the Strictly Come Dancing sort of show and everything that they're trying to do. I mean, I don't really follow the show. It's not my bag, but I am aware that there are stories that keep getting reported about how the dancers are treated by the professionals and what have you. So obviously that particular show is trying to go over and above board, but clearly that's not across the section of all different types of media production. Obviously, we're not going to say what particular company he works for or what particular show he produces.
You can do your open source.
Well, yeah. Homework, kids, is research Charlotte Tollan and find
OSINT
out
challenge of the day.
Yeah. Answers on a postcode. And if you do find who this person is, you can write to me at diaryofaprivateinvestigator@gmail.com. And no, we don't advocate that. We don't want any slandering or anything like that.
Definitely not.
Keep that one to yourselves, guys. So you've moved forward. You've obviously realised that you've developed skills in OSINT, open source intelligence work. You've done all the work. You've put the abusive relationship behind you. You've realised that you've got a whole new skill set that you actually enjoy doing.
Massively.
You've gone on the surveillance course with your funky hair. And your bag of wigs.
Literally.
Well, women are great at that because women have got much more disguises than men. Yeah. I've found by like I say, helping out on the courses that I do. I already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it, and I'm already going to hate myself for asking this question, to be fair. How have you found it being a female operative in what is potentially dominated by white males?
Brilliant. And it's interesting this came up because we're at the tail end. Well, we're just in April now, but last month was Women's History Month. Last month was Women's History Month. We're at the tail end of that. And me and John were doing a little debrief yesterday and came to realise that there are more females on our team than men, which he was slightly shocked about himself when he went, I'm the minority.
Well, I mean, I'm not, obviously, like I've said, my company is predominantly me. I have people who work for me. And I have connections up and down the country of operatives and what have you. But there is a lack of female operatives.
There's a lack of strong female operatives. Yeah.
Controversial. I mean, it's like, almost sounds like you're slagging off some other one.
rude.
Yeah. There's only a few good female operatives. And there's quite a few female operatives.
That came across so wrong.
Johnny on the spot. I mean, is that my awareness? I mean, obviously, I'm in various groups and networks where I can call upon staff, but I'm aware that there aren't that many, and the few that there are near me who I know and who I've used tend to then have gone off and done other pieces of work. So, obviously, you're on the show. What's your interpretation of how many women there are out there that are in our industry?
In the entire industry, we are definitely a minority.
Yep.
Definitely. And I think it's a shame, but I think it's because it is predominantly people from a military and police background, to be totally honest. I think it's not really sort of seen as a female job. And I think females can actually be really versatile and can really be utilised if they've got the right mindset. You need to be able to go undercover and be the honey trap, or do what we were saying earlier and be able to put the tears on and play a student, or do all that cool undercover work. But at the same time, you need to be able to crawl through bushes at 3 o'clock in the morning to deploy a camera without a scrap of makeup on your face, get covered in mud. It doesn't matter. Go onto a farm at the middle of the night and it stinks and you've got to put a camera in a shed. You need to be able to do that with no fear. We joked earlier, what was it you said? Something about having balls. And I went,
I never said that. I am diverse and politically correct and all of those big words. I would never say you have to go balls deep or grow up hair or any of those kind of sayings.
But I think it's important for a woman to have balls as well as be able to do the whole, like I said, kind of, I don't like the phrase honey trap, but you have got to be able to do that. You've got to be able to fit into a very female character and be able to walk into a bar as a couple and look like a woman, but you also need to muck in and do the man work too, because you can't expect to be on a team of men and not do what they do. It's got to be fair. I know you guys would never wear a dress, but we need to be able to do all of it, you know?
Hey, only on a Saturday. Yeah. Do you know, I mean, again, as you're talking, I'm thinking, and I'm kind of thinking, there aren't really many situations that I've been in that I would turn around and sort of think only a man could do it. I don't. I think a man and a woman, and again, there's a distinct lack of people from an ethnic background as well who are in our industry. I think I've only ever met two people. So again, but I don't think you have to be man, woman, black, white, tall, short, fat, whatever. Anybody can do our job. It's just having like I said, the common sense, the knowledge, and alacrity is today's big word.
Yeah.
I have a word of the week.
Word.
And skill set to do it.
Yeah, you've got to have an inquisitive mind. And I think we are trying to blend in with society. So we need to blend in with society. And you can be anyone, male, female, black, white, it doesn't matter. We're trying to blend in. So you can look like anyone.
Yeah. Just
don't have the crazy hair that I did on my course.
Yeah. Okay, so next point I've got written down in my long list of 4 points to talk about. I told you I like to plan these things out. You are currently studying to be an investigative journalist.
I am, yeah. So obviously I've got the theatrical background, and then moving into this, following the abuse, I just wanted to be fully covert. I wanted to vanish for obvious reasons. And I've adapted and learned all these skills and all these cool things. And, you know, I said earlier at school, I didn't want to pay attention, but if I love something, I will fully focus and fully absorb myself into it. I'm an absolute geek. I'll go on every course possible to learn everything. So I feel like I've done a lot of learning about the covert world and undercover work and surveillance and private investigation and all of that. And now, yeah, my new thing is journalism, because I think what better way to combine show business and the covert world than investigative journalism. So hopefully one day those two worlds can intertwine.
So it's in its infancy.
Very much so.
So where do you see yourself then in 5 years' time?
5 years' time? Okay, I had a bit of a longer plan than that, to be honest. But 5 years, I'd probably like to just be... I want to sort of produce small documentaries. BBC Panorama style, obviously not. I don't think I'm going to be working for the BBC in 5 years. You never know. If there's any talent scouts out there, I'm available. But yeah, I think something along those lines, sort of documentary making. So I can sort of put together the theatrical thespian skills and the investigative side.
Does John know that you're leaving his company in 5 years' time?
I've been very open with John about everything, and he's fully supportive, and he has said if that kind of ends up being the case, then it would actually be quite handy, a little bit like Hunted. You can kind of be the face of the company and help to run the company, but of course you're doing that, so it's actually hopefully going to be good promotion.
The Hunters have got lives as well, and I have worked with, he said name dropping here, I have actually done a job with one of the Hunters, so... you can have multiple skill sets and backgrounds and things that you do. It keeps it all interesting.
Very much so.
Right, I'm very much aware of the time and that we could talk for the next couple of hours, but I'm gonna have to wrap it up, unfortunately. So thank you for coming. Thank you for giving me time. No, it's been good.
Thank you.
Final reminder of buymeacoffee.com/DOAPI, and any questions, any funny stories, anything like that, email me on diaryofaprivateinvestigator@gmail.com. And don't forget today's sponsors, that is Blue Husky, suppliers of trackers and covert cameras, etc., and the Covert Group, who also supply covert cameras and more of a bespoke range. So please do check out the two sponsors' websites. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Charlotte, and we'll catch up with you next month.